Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're all about better conversations and,
Mhm.
and better relationships. We're diving into nonviolent communication, NVC for short, with Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication, a language of life, as our guide.
Mhm.
You can think of it as a crash course in speaking and listening
Mhm.
in a way that builds connection, even when things get tough.
It's fascinating, how Rosenberg starts by connecting language and violence, not necessarily fists flying violence,
Yeah.
but but those subtle ways we use words to hurt, judge, or shut down.
Yeah, I admit I've definitely wielded a sarcastic word or two in my time. But what I find really intriguing is how NVC gives us this framework to shift that, a four-part process: observation, feeling, need, and request.
It's like learning a new dance, one where each step helps us understand ourselves and the other person better. It all starts with observation, which sounds simple enough, right?
Well, in theory, but I'm guessing it's more than just seeing what's in front of us.
Exactly. The key is separating observation from evaluation. Rosenberg gives this great example. This poem about a so-called lazy man. Turns out, what one person sees as laziness, another might see as relaxation or prioritizing differently.
Oh, that reminds me of the story Rosenberg tells about the teachers complaining about their principal's long stories during meetings. Instead of saying, hey, these meetings are running long and it cuts into our planning time, they just rolled their eyes and stewed in frustration.
Yeah, classic example of how unexpressed needs lead to judgment and resentment. It's like they skipped right over the feeling step in the MBC process.
Okay, so let's unpack those feelings because I think so many of us were raised to think big boys don't cry or just toughen up.
Right, and Rosenberg points out how damaging that can be. He tells this story about a teacher who tells a frightened student, big boys don't get frightened. Imagine how that makes the kid feel, ashamed for having a natural human response.
Yeah, it's like we're taught to become emotionally illiterate. There's that other anecdote, the college student being told to toughen up about a noisy roommate.
Both stories highlight how we're often pressured to ignore our feelings, both our own and those of others.
But NVC encourages us to do the opposite, right? To
Yeah.
tune in and express those feelings authentically because honestly, bottling things up only works for so long.
Exactly. Rosenberg provides this helpful list of feelings in his book. It's like expanding our emotional vocabulary so we can pinpoint what's going on inside.
Instead of just I'm upset, it's I'm feeling anxious because
Which brings us to needs. The core of NVC, what's the connection between our feelings and needs?
NVC suggests that every feeling we have,
Mhm.
from joy to anger to despair, is a signal that a need is either being met or not.
So if I'm feeling frustrated, it's because a need of mine, maybe for clarity or respect, isn't being fulfilled. Precisely. And this is where things get really interesting because NVC isn't about placing blame. It's about recognizing that our feelings stem from our own unmet needs, not from what someone else did or didn't do.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when someone's late and it throws off my whole schedule, it's pretty tempting to go straight to, you're so inconsiderate.
Yeah, it's a natural reaction.
Yeah.
But think about how that shuts down communication. Rosenberg contrasts that blaming statement with an NVC approach. I feel anxious when you're late because I need to be on time for this appointment. See the difference?
One is attack mode, and the other is expressing a need vulnerably. And I'm guessing the latter is more likely to lead to a solution.
Exactly. And this shift applies even to those good intentions that can backfire. Like parents saying, it hurts mommy and daddy when you get poor grades.
Oof, I know that one well, both as the kid and the parent.
It's motivating through guilt, which doesn't create a healthy dynamic. Instead, NVC suggests focusing on the need. We're concerned about your grades because we need to know you're getting the support you need to succeed.
That feels so much more supportive. And it seems like this distinction between blame and need is key to moving from that emotional slavery Rosenberg talks about.
Ah, yes, those three stages of emotional development: slavery, obnoxiousness, and liberation. Want to dive into those?
Absolutely. But you know what? Let's take a breath here. Give our listener a moment to digest all this juicy NVC goodness. We'll be back in a flash to unpack those emotional stages and more.
All right, we're back. And you know those emotional stages Rosenberg talks about? I'm ready to unpack those because it feels like understanding where we are on that spectrum is key to using NVC effectively.
Absolutely. So we start with emotional slavery. This is where we think we're responsible for other people's feelings, constantly trying to keep everyone happy, even if it means sacrificing our own needs.
Oh, I know this one personally. It's like that feeling of walking on eggshells, always afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. You end up exhausted and resentful, but you keep doing it because you think it's what good people do. Exactly.
Mhm.
And then there's the flip side, the obnoxious stage. This is where we rebel against that responsibility, essentially saying, tough luck, your feelings are your problem, not mine.
So picture that angsty teenager slamming their door and shouting, "Leave me alone."
Hmm.
They're asserting their independence, but maybe not in the most skillful way.
Right. And Rosenberg actually shares a hilarious anecdote about this. In one of his workshops, a young woman, having just realized she was stuck in emotional slavery, suddenly blurts out that she needs to do something else when the group is given an assignment.
I love that. She's like, nope, not playing by those rules anymore. It's a bit clumsy. But hey, at least she's recognizing her own needs and setting boundaries right.
Exactly. It's a messy step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we want to reach this stage of emotional liberation. This isn't about being selfish or ignoring others' feelings. It's about responding to their needs out of genuine compassion, not fear, guilt, or obligation.
So it's that sweet spot
Yeah.
where you're taking responsibility for your own feelings and needs while also being present and empathetic to those around you.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we all have needs. And meeting those needs doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. NVC helps us find ways to collaborate and support each other without sacrificing our own well-being.
And speaking of supporting each other, we've been focusing a lot on expressing ourselves, using the 4 steps of NVC. But there's this whole other side to it, right? The receiving end, the empathic listening.
You got it. It's just as important as expressing ourselves clearly. It's not just about hearing the words. It's about emptying our minds and listening with our whole being.
No, that's a challenge for me. My mind tends to race ahead, thinking of what I want to say next, or offering solutions before the person's even finished talking. Is that what you mean by emptying our minds?
It's definitely part of it. It's about resisting those impulses and really focusing on understanding the other person's perspective, their observations, feelings, needs, and requests. We reflect back what we hear to make sure we're on the same page.
It's like holding up a mirror to their experience so they feel truly heard and seen. Rosenberg tells that moving story about the volunteer and the elderly woman in the hospital who keeps repeating, "I want to die."
Such a powerful example. Instead of trying to talk her out of it or offer platitudes, the volunteer simply reflects back the woman's feelings of despair. And in that moment of deep connection, something shifts for the woman.
It's like by simply acknowledging her pain, the volunteer creates a space for healing. But what about those situations where someone's anger feels threatening? Can NVC really work in those high-stakes moments?
Remember that story about the teacher who used empathy to de-escalate a potential rape situation? That seems counterintuitive. But by focusing on understanding the young man's feelings and needs, she manages to shift the energy of the situation.
That story always blows me away. It highlights the power of empathy to cut through even the most intense emotions. But I have to ask, how did the teacher's words actually address the young man's needs? What can we learn from that to apply in our own lives?
That's a great question. It's subtle, but by consistently reflecting back what she heard, the teacher created a space for the young man to feel seen and understood. It seems his need was to be acknowledged, to have his pain validated.
So even though his actions were harmful, by addressing that underlying need, she created a possibility for connection and de-escalation.
Exactly. And sometimes empathy also involves understanding someone's no. We often take it personally. But it could just mean our request doesn't align with their needs at that moment.
It's like Rosenberg's example of the woman who refused his invitation for ice cream. It wasn't about rejecting him personally. She was afraid of being judged based on past interactions.
By empathizing with her fear and need for safety, he was able to shift the dynamic from one of rejection to understanding. But NVC isn't just about navigating external conflicts. It's also about applying these principles to our relationship with ourselves.
Yes. We've talked about avoiding self-judgment, but how exactly does NVC help us resolve those internal battles? After all, we can be our own harshest critics.
It's about bringing that same compassionate awareness to our inner dialogue. Instead of beating ourselves up for mistakes, we can explore our unmet needs and look for more constructive ways to meet them.
Rosenberg's story about ruining his new suit and expensive pen comes to mind. He was rushing to help others and ended up neglecting his own need for self-care.
Such a relatable example. It reminds us that even with good intentions, we can still fall into patterns of self-neglect.
It's like we need to give ourselves the same empathy and understanding we offer others.
Exactly. We can ask ourselves, what need was I trying to meet? Or what need of mine went unmet in that situation? It's about shifting from blame to curiosity and understanding.
You know, I'm realizing that NVC isn't just about communication techniques. It's about cultivating a whole new mindset. a way of being in the world.
I couldn't agree more. It's about approaching ourselves and others with compassion, curiosity, and a genuine desire for connection.
It's powerful stuff. And there's one more aspect I'd love to explore, expressing appreciation in an NVC way. But let's give our listener a moment to let all this sink in. We'll be back shortly to dive into appreciation and wrap up this incredible deep dive. We're back, and after exploring all these intense emotions and communication breakdowns, I'm ready for something a little more uplifting. Let's talk about appreciation. Because honestly, who doesn't love a genuine compliment? But I'm guessing NVC has a unique take on this, right?
You bet. NVC appreciation goes beyond just saying, good job. It's about expressing gratitude in a way that deepens connection and highlights the specific impact someone had on us.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for us. How do we express appreciation the NVC way?
It involved three key components. First, you clearly state the action you appreciate, something specific the person did. Then you express the feeling that action evoked in you. Finally, you connect it back to the need of yours that was met by that action.
So instead of just saying, you're amazing, it's more like, when you stayed late to help me finish that project, I felt so relieved because I really needed to meet that deadline.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond vague compliments and articulating the real impact of the other person's actions. Rosenberg actually uses a funny example. From one of his workshops, a participant called him brilliant. But instead of just accepting the praise, he dug deeper.
He challenged her, right? He asked her to identify the specific words he had said that resonated with her and the feelings those words evoked.
Yes, it's about moving past those generic labels and connecting with the heart of the appreciation.
That's so powerful. It's like we're training ourselves to be more mindful of the positive impact we have on each other. Are there any other examples of NVC appreciation in action?
Rosenberg talks about the Sufi Muslim way of expressing appreciation, which is really beautiful. They acknowledge the divine essence within the person they're thanking. It's like recognizing the inherent goodness in each other.
Wow, that's taking it to a whole other level. It's a reminder that our actions can be an expression of our deepest values, and we can celebrate those qualities in each other.
Absolutely. And on a lighter note, Rosenberg also tells this funny story about Golda Meir, the former prime minister of Israel. She once chided someone for false humility, saying that denying the importance of their contributions wasn't helpful to anyone.
She was basically saying, own your awesomeness.
Right. It's about recognizing that receiving appreciation gracefully is just as important as giving it authentically.
I love that. It's like completing the cycle of appreciation, honoring both the giver and the receiver. So as we wrap up this deep dive into NVC, what are the key takeaways you want our listener to walk away with?
I think the biggest one is this. NVC isn't just a set of communication techniques. It's a profound shift in mindset. It's about approaching every interaction, whether with your boss, your partner, your kids, or even yourself, with empathy, curiosity, and a genuine desire to connect.
It's about recognizing that we all have needs, and those needs aren't a threat. They're an opportunity for understanding and collaboration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the more we practice NVC, the more we can create a world where those connections flourish.
It's powerful stuff. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our listeners' journey with NVC. But for now, we'll leave you with this. What are some of your most common communication habits that create disconnect? And how can you start replacing those with the principles of NVC? Maybe grab a pen and paper, jot down some thoughts, and see what shifts you can start making today.
And remember, you don't have to be perfect at it. It's a practice, a lifelong journey of learning and growth. So be patient with yourself. Celebrate your successes, and keep exploring this incredible tool for connection and compassion.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep connecting.